My mother-in-law dumped my casserole in the trash with a sneer, right in front of my husband's boss. At least, that's who she thought he was. The sound of the glass dish hitting the bottom of the trash can was louder than it should have been. For a moment, no one spoke. The air in the dining room went still, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for someone to break. Diane, my mother-in-law, brushed her hands on her skirt like she'd just finished cleaning something dirty. She didn't even glance my way. I told you, Lena, no one likes soggy casserole. It looked like something you dragged out of a swamp. I saved everyone the trouble. I stood frozen by the kitchen counter, gripping the edge of it to stop my hands from shaking. She'd waited until everyone was seated to do this, her grand performance. And everyone just watched. My husband Tom gave a short, awkward laugh, like he didn't know whose side to be on. Again, next to him, his co-worker Matt looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair and avoiding eye contact. Across the table, the quiet man in the gray suit raised his eyes slowly from his plate. He hadn't spoken much all evening. Diane had introduced him as Tom's boss, and then mostly ignored him, brushing off every attempt he made to speak with me. He hadn't said a word when she interrupted me mid-sentence or corrected my pronunciation of harissa. But now he watched Diane with calm, unreadable eyes. Diane returned to her seat like nothing had happened. Anyway, she said, picking up her wine glass. I've saved dinner. Saved it. From me. Like I was the problem. Like the food I had spent hours making was a joke. No one said a word in my defense. I took a slow breath, swallowed hard. I could feel my face flushing, not from shame, but from anger I couldn't let out, yet. The man in the corner reached for his wine glass and took a small sip. His eyes flicked to me for just a second. It was subtle, but I saw it, understanding. He knew. All of it. He wasn't Tom's boss. He was mine. And Diane had just insulted both of us. I stayed quiet, watching her laugh at her own joke, watching Tom laugh with her. Neither of them had any idea what they'd just done. But they would. Soon. A month earlier, the sunlight poured through the tall windows of the office as Lena sat across from Eli, her boss. The conference room smelled like espresso and polished wood. Eli leaned back in his chair, watching her with a rare smile. You're getting the promotion, Lena. Senior brand director. You've earned it. She blinked, lips parting slightly. Wait, seriously? Seriously. You're the best strategist we've got. But, he added, raising an eyebrow, you also seem to vanish the moment the workday ends. No social media. No events. No partner at company functions. She laughed softly, trying to mask the knot tightening in her stomach. My personal life is complicated. He gave her a look. Complicated is fine. But I'm throwing a dinner party next month. Bring someone. Or better, host one. Lena didn't say no. She never did. Not to Eli. But the second she stepped into her car afterward, her mood shifted. She could already hear Diane's voice in her head, slicing through every little thing, her clothes, her hair, the way she said quinoa. There was no way her in-laws could know about the promotion. Not yet. Diane had always hated her. Since the beginning. She's just not polished, Diane had whispered to Tom once when she thought Lena couldn't hear. You could do better. Tom didn't argue. He never did. When Lena told him about the dinner, she said it was for one of his work friends, just to smooth things over. Oh sure, Tom had said. Diane'll help. She loves hosting. I don't want Diane to help, Lena replied. I want to cook. Tom looked up from his phone. You know how she gets. It's easier if you just let her do her thing. And that was the problem. He always let her do her thing. But this time, Lena had her own plan. She messaged Eli privately and invited him to the dinner. Not as her boss, but as a friend of the family. He agreed without hesitation, curious now not just about her talent, but the life she kept hidden from everyone at work. She didn't tell Tom who Eli really was. She knew Diane would be herself, loud, judgmental, dismissive. That was the point. Let them show their true selves. Let them underestimate her. The fuse was set. And Lena? She had no intention of stopping the explosion. The smell of roasted garlic and spiced lamb filled the kitchen. Lena moved quickly but carefully, plating the roasted vegetables with tweezers like she'd seen on cooking shows. Everything had to be perfect. The salad was crisp, the casserole was bubbling golden, the dessert chilling in the fridge. Every detail had been planned for days. Timing, seating, wine pairing. She even polished the silverware herself. She looked at the clock. 35 minutes until guests arrived. That's when the front door creaked open. Hello, came Diane's sharp voice, followed by the unmistakable sound of heels clicking across the floor. Lena's stomach clenched. She hadn't expected her this early. Diane stepped into the kitchen like she owned it. Pearl earrings, flawless makeup, arms full of shopping bags. You're doing everything yourself? You're brave, she said, peering over Lena's shoulder. Or foolish. Lena smiled thinly. Everything's under control. Diane set her bags down with a sigh. Well, I brought a few things, just in case. Your casserole looked a bit rustic last time. She pulled out a tray of neatly packaged, pre-made appetizers. I'll heat these up. They're foolproof. Lena opened her mouth to object, but stopped. Not yet. She turned back to the stove, pretending not to notice as Diane poked at the seating chart Lena had printed and placed on the side table. Why are you putting him next to you? Diane asked, pointing at Eli's name card. Shouldn't Tom be at your side? It's a casual dinner, Lena said. The seating's fine. Diane clicked her tongue. You always do things your own way, don't you? Before Lena could reply, Diane had already begun rearranging the name cards. It didn't stop there. The linen napkins were swapped for Diane's floral one. Lena's rosemary butter was tossed and replaced with margarine. And without warning, Diane lifted Lena's casserole off the counter and sniffed it. Smells heavy, she muttered. I'll just keep this in the fridge and put out the lasagna I brought instead. Italian is safer. Lena watched her, breath held tight in her chest. Everything she'd made. Erased. But this time something was different. The sting of humiliation didn't sink as deep. Not like before. She wiped her hands on a towel and looked at Diane, really looked at her. So smug, so sure she was in charge. Inside, something shifted. A quiet snap. No more, Lena thought. You don't get to ruin this. She didn't speak it. Not yet. But the war had begun. Eli sat quietly at the end of the long dinner table, dressed in a simple gray suit with no tie. He looked out of place, not because of his clothes, but because of the way he carried himself. Calm, focused. Like someone who noticed everything, even the things people tried to hide. He gave Lena a small nod when she brought him a glass of wine. Thanks, he said softly. She returned a quick smile before walking away, her expression neutral again, as she took a seat beside Tom. Her movements were smooth, but Eli saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened when her mother-in-law spoke. Diane had greeted Eli at the door earlier with a fake smile and a once-over glance. Oh, you must be Tom's new intern, she'd said, grabbing his coat before he could reply. We always love when the young ones tag along. Just don't drink too much, dear. You've got a baby face. Eli hadn't corrected her. He just smiled politely and followed her into the dining room. Now, he sat between Tom's awkward co-worker and Diane's cousin, listening. Diane had been talking nonstop since they sat down, bragging about her garden club, complaining about Lena's choice of table decor, telling a story about how Tom used to date much more elegant girls in college. Each little jab was dressed as a joke, but Eli caught the pattern. And Lena never fired back. She smiled, nodded, poured wine, stayed quiet. Tom didn't seem to notice any of it, or maybe he didn't want to. He laughed at Diane's jokes and changed the subject whenever the tension grew too thick. Eli studied him, then shifted his gaze back to Lena. At work, she was confident and sharp. She led teams, closed deals, handled big clients without breaking a sweat. She had always kept her personal life private, but Eli had seen the signs, the tired eyes, the forced smiles, the way she avoided any event involving spouses or family. He understood now. When Diane stood up, announced that the casserole looked like something the dog dragged in, and dumped it in the trash, Eli watched Lena's reaction more closely than anything else. No outburst. No tears. Just a long, silent breath. Eli turned his glass slowly in his hand. He wasn't here just as a guest. He was here because Lena mattered. And now he knew the truth. She'd been living with this for far too long. And tonight, it was going to end. The dining room was quiet in a way that made every clink of silverware sound louder than it should. The chandelier light cast soft shadows across the table, but nothing felt warm. The food had been served, the wine poured, but no one looked comfortable. Diane took a bite of the chicken, chewed slowly, and then set her fork down with a theatrical sigh. Dry, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. But I suppose not everyone's meant to cook. Lena didn't look up. She kept her face calm, her fingers gently wrapping around her wine glass. She didn't drink, though. Not yet. Tom laughed, short, nervous. She tried something new, he said, not even looking at her. That's what counts, right? Diane smiled at him and patted his hand. Well, maybe next time we'll just order in and spare everyone. Matt, Tom's co-worker, glanced at Lena, clearly uncomfortable. He looked like he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Diane's cousin reached for the bread and avoided eye contact. Lena sat perfectly still. Then Diane stood up, walked around the table with slow, deliberate steps, and picked up the casserole dish from the sideboard. This, she said, holding it like it was radioactive, smells like feet. She chuckled, then turned to the trash can, lifted the lid, and dumped the entire dish in with a loud plop. I'm doing everyone a favor. Tom didn't stop her. He chuckled again, weakly. Come on, Mom. Eli didn't laugh. He didn't move. He just watched. His eyes never left Lena. She looked down at her plate. The sting wasn't new. Diane had humiliated her 100 times before. The comments, the insults, the subtle digs at her appearance, her job, her marriage. But tonight was different. Lena looked up and caught Eli's eyes across the table. He said nothing. But his gaze wasn't pitying, it was steady, focused, waiting. Lena sat back in her chair slowly and smoothed her dress. Something inside her had shifted, not in a loud or angry way, but in that cold, steady way that feels permanent. A decision quiet and sharp. This ends now. Not with shouting, not with tears, with truth, and power, and precision. Let Diane laugh. Let Tom ignore it. Let them all believe she was just the quiet girl who didn't fight back. She smiled faintly and picked up her wine glass, finally taking a sip. They had no idea what was coming. The moment lingered, heavy with quiet tension and the thick scent of garlic and roasted meat. Conversations had died down to scattered clinks of cutlery and awkward sips of wine. Diane returned to her seat with a smug little smile, clearly proud of herself. Then Eli spoke. "Shame about the casserole," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "I was actually looking forward to trying it." Diane blinked, caught off guard. "Oh," she said with a laugh that didn't quite land. "It wasn't, well, it didn't really fit the rest of the meal. A bit too homemade." "I like homemade," Eli replied, still calm. "Tells me someone put in effort." The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was sharp. Tom glanced at Diane, unsure whether to defend her or defuse things. He chose his usual route, pretend nothing happened. He laughed weakly and reached for his wine. "You should try the lasagna. That's more of a crowd pleaser." Eli didn't look at Tom. He turned to Diane instead. "So Diane," he began, "do you cook often?" She tilted her head, caught between flattery and suspicion. "Of course. I host constantly. I've done it for years. People love my food." "Interesting," Eli said. "Because Lena mentioned she made everything tonight." Diane stiffened just for a second. "Well, I helped. I mean, she tries. But you know how it is, young women, always rushing to impress without really knowing what they're doing." Eli set down his fork, folding his hands neatly on the table. "You don't think Lena knows what she's doing?" he asked lightly. Too lightly. Tom looked up, finally sensing something off. "Hey man, don't take her seriously. My mom jokes like that all the time." "I'm not joking," Eli said, eyes still on Diane. "I'm asking, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she did most of the work. And you threw her food in the trash." No one spoke. Lena stared at her plate, lips twitching. She looked at Eli now, really looked, and she saw what the others didn't. He wasn't here as a random guest. He hadn't just wandered into her life by accident tonight. He'd come with a purpose. And he wasn't done yet. Tom shifted in his chair. "Wait, have we met before?" Eli smiled. "Maybe, but I usually don't wear suits this plain." Lena's hand moved to her wine glass, and this time she didn't sip. She simply smiled, the first real smile of the night, because they still had no idea who he was, but they were about to. Eli reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, clean business card. Without saying a word, he stood up and walked around the table. The room went quiet as everyone turned to watch him. He stopped beside Diane and gently placed the card in front of her plate. She blinked at it, confused at first. Then she picked it up and read the name. Her face dropped. "Eli Morrison," she read aloud. Her voice was suddenly tight. "Senior Vice President, Sinclair and Holt." Eli smiled politely. "Next time," he said calmly, "maybe don't insult a senior executive's partner. Or their cooking." Tom's head whipped around. "Wait, what?" Lena stood now, her voice calm but firm. "I work at Sinclair and Holt. I've been there for 5 years. Last month, I was promoted to senior brand director. Eli's my boss." Tom stared at her like she'd just spoken another language. "You never said anything." "You never asked," Lena replied. "And you've never cared about what I do, unless it makes you look good." Diane's mouth opened, then closed. I didn't know. If I'd known. If you'd known I had status," Eli interrupted, "you would have treated me better. And maybe her too." The table was silent. Even Matt, who had barely spoken all night, looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. Diane's tone changed quickly, soft and overly sweet. "Lena, sweetheart, you should have told us. We didn't mean anything by it. You know how family teases." Lena shook her head. "That wasn't teasing. That was humiliation. And you've done it for years." Tom stood up now, trying to regain control. "Okay, look, maybe this went a little sideways, but we're all family. We can just—" "We're not," Lena cut in. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like glass. "We're not a family. Families support each other. They defend each other. You never have." Diane's smile was gone now. "Lena, let's not make a scene." Eli looked around the table. This whole dinner was a scene. No one disagreed. Lena picked up her phone from the side table and slipped it into her clutch. She turned to Eli. "Do you mind giving me a ride?" He nodded without hesitation. Tom stepped forward. "Lena, wait." She didn't look at him. Diane sat frozen, holding the card in her hand like it burned. For the first time, she looked small. And Lena? She looked free. The rest of the dinner unraveled quickly. Matt made an excuse about needing to let his dog out and left within 5 minutes. Diane's cousin followed, pretending she had an early morning. No one touched dessert. No one said goodbye. Diane stood at the head of the table, her hands gripping the back of a chair, eyes unfocused, still holding Eli's business card. She didn't speak again. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't make it worse. Lena walked upstairs in silence. In the bedroom she had shared with Tom, she pulled out the small overnight bag she kept tucked in the back of the closet. Just in case. She'd packed it before, more than once, but never walked out the door. This time, she zipped it closed without pausing. Downstairs, Tom paced the living room. He turned when he heard her steps. "Wait, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. Lena didn't slow down. "I'm leaving." He stepped in front of the door. "Don't overreact." "Okay. Yes, my mom was out of line, but we can fix this. Just calm down." She looked at him. Really looked. "You've watched her do this to me for years." Tom shifted. "It's not that simple." "No," she said, her voice low but steady. "It is. You never stood up for me. Not once. You let her talk down to me, embarrass me, control everything. And you laughed along with her." He reached for her arm. "I didn't mean to." She pulled back. "You don't get to mean well now. Not when it's convenient." The front door creaked open. Eli was standing just outside, leaning against the car. His coat was slung over one arm, the other hand resting on the... Lena walked past Tom without another word. "Lena, please," Tom said behind. "This is our home." She paused, hand on the doorframe. "No, it's your mother's house. You just live in it." Outside, the night air was cool. A soft breeze blew through the trees lining the quiet street. Eli opened the passenger door for her. "You okay?" he asked as she slid in. "I will be," she said. He nodded, closed the door, and walked around to the driver's side. Inside, Diane stood frozen in the dining room, staring at the mess left behind, half-eaten food, empty chairs, and the empty place where Lena had once sat. But Lena wasn't hers to break anymore. She was done waiting to be defended. She'd defend herself now. The new apartment wasn't big, but it was hers. Just a one-bedroom with tall windows, white walls, and a tiny kitchen that opened into the living room. For the first time in years, Lena didn't have to ask anyone where the mugs should go or explain why she liked her furniture minimal and clean. She cooked in silence, slept without stress, woke up without the weight of walking on eggshells, and at work she thrived. Without the constant drain of home, Lena's focus sharpened. Her ideas were bold, her presentations flawless. Within a month, Eli called her into his office again. "You've always been good," he told her. "Now you're unstoppable." He promoted her again. Director of Creative Strategy. A title that once felt like a distant dream was now printed on her business card. Lena smiled at the small plaque on her new office door. Not for anyone else. Just for herself. The peace didn't last long, of course. 2 weeks later, Diane called. "Lena, sweetheart," she said, drawing out the words. "I've been thinking. Maybe I was a little harsh that night. I just want things to go back to the way they were." Lena held the phone for a moment before responding. "You mean where you insult me in my own home and no one stops you?" There was a pause. "Well, I didn't mean it like that. You know how family can be. We all say things in the heat of the moment. You've said things for years, Diane." Diane cleared her throat. "So you're just going to stay angry forever?" "No," Lena said calmly. "I'm just done pretending this is a relationship worth saving." She ended the call and blocked the number. A week later, Tom showed up at her office without warning. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. "Can we talk?" he asked. Lena stood tall in her heels and blazer, arms crossed. "About what?" "I miss you," he said. "I messed up. I should have defended you." She didn't flinch. "You had years to do that. I can change." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "Divorce papers." His face fell as he took them. "You're serious?" "I was serious every time you chose her over me." Tom looked down at the envelope, speechless. Lena turned back to her office. "Close the door on your way out." She didn't owe anyone an apology, and she wasn't going back. 6 months later, Lena's life looked nothing like it used to. Her apartment had more plants now, more light, and the soft hum of peace. Every morning, she woke up without dread. She made her own coffee, played her favorite music while she worked from her sunlit desk, and didn't answer to anyone who didn't respect her. Work was thriving. Her name was now known across the company and beyond. Her bold campaign ideas had been featured in a top industry magazine. Eli often sent her one-word messages after big wins. Brilliant. Unstoppable. More. Then came the email. Subject: Keynote Speaker Invitation, Women Rising Conference. They wanted her to speak, not just as a professional, but as a woman who had stood up, walked away, and never looked back. Her story had spread quietly, word of a creative leader who left behind a toxic home and rebuilt her life on her own terms. They didn't want the version wrapped in a pretty bow. They wanted the truth. Lena said yes. Meanwhile, across town, Diane sat in the country club lobby, frowning at a letter in her hands. It was brief and polite. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, after careful review, your club privileges and sponsorship have been discontinued, effective immediately. No further appeals will be accepted. She had no idea why, but Eli did. He never mentioned it to Lena. He didn't need to. The day of the conference, Lena stood at the podium in a sharp navy dress, microphone clipped to her collar. Rows of women looked up at her. She told them everything, not with anger, not with tears, but with steady truth. I used to believe silence was strength. That enduring disrespect made me graceful. I don't believe that anymore. She told them how her voice had been dismissed at home, how she was taught to be small so others could feel big, and how that changed the moment she chose herself. At the end of her speech, she looked out at the crowd, her voice calm and sure. Sometimes, she said, revenge doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be cruel. Sometimes, revenge is best served with silence and success. The audience stood. Applause filled the room. Lena smiled, not the polite smile she used to wear, but a real one, free, strong, and completely hers. She stepped off the stage into a future she had built herself. And behind her, the past stayed exactly where it belonged.